Donald Trump's staggering cognitive decline was once again put on full display during a campaign event in Pennsylvania as he tried to assure people in vain that he is not cognitively impaired. But the polls and increasing media scrutiny show that Americans know the truth. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to play from this recent campaign event by Donald Trump in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, okay? Now, Donald Trump, as a reminder, is 78 years old, the oldest presidential candidate in American history, and the polls continuously, persistently show that a majority of Americans, number one, think that he is mentally and physically unfit to be president, and number two, that he is less mentally and physically fit to be president than Vice President Kamala Harris. These are facts borne out in polls. This is the polling perception. Whether you agree with it or not, this is the polling reality. So Donald Trump is aware of this. He is aware that there are questions, increasing scrutiny about his cognitive fitness. And so he spent precious minutes trying to assure people that he is actually a very stable genius at the peak of cognitive health. And it's actually Harris who's cognitively impaired. So we're going to play these clips and unpack it together, and you be the judge.
I have no cognitive. She may have a cognitive problem, but I have no cognitive.
I have no cognitive. She may have the cognitive problem. I have no cognitive problem. Another clip in which he tries to assure Americans that he's the stable one, the peak of cognitive fitness, and it's Harris who is not.
Very nice that they say it. I've done cognitive tests. I've done them twice, and I aced both of them. And the doctor, in one case, said, I've never seen anybody ace them. They've never seen anybody ace them. But very nice.
So again, he's referring to the Montreal Cognitive Fitness Exam, in which it just tests people whether or not like they're in a state of dementia. Can you recognize a television, a giraffe? Can you count backwards? Things like this. I mean, Donald Trump is actually bragging about that. And as far as I'm aware, he hasn't taken that test in years. The last time he took it was during, allegedly, the 2020 election. Well, it's been 4 years, and Donald Trump is even worse than he was in 2020. So who knows? Other examples of Donald Trump's total lack of cognitive stability and genius.
The energy is so big, it's so like amorphous. It's all over the place. If you make donuts, it's a stove and the truck to bring them to wherever they're being delivered. The energy is.
You see how the people on stage, like the host and the person whom he brought on stage, who I assume is a member of the audience, we're not even going to play the audio. Just look at their faces. Yeah, that doesn't seem very persuasive when the MAGA supporting host and somebody from the MAGA crowd are like, what the hell is this guy talking about exactly? Some more clips, and then we'll look into a really well-written op-ed from the Philadelphia Inquirer, which is a part of Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is perhaps the most crucial swing state in this election, and Trump is desperately trying to win it. We hear a couple more clips.
So we're going to let them frack like a duck. Frack. So
ducks quack. They do not frack, although if they did frack, that would be an interesting addition to the labor force. As far as I'm aware, there are no ducks in the United States employed as energy producers, drilling or fracking. Strange stuff. One more.
You know, the black population over the last short period of time, their unemployment numbers have just skyrocketed. The reason is people coming into the country,
So this again, the issue, black unemployment is lower under President Biden and Vice President Harris than it ever was under Donald Trump. HBCUs, historic black colleges and universities, have by an orders of magnitude greater funding under Biden and Harris than they did under Trump. Black small business ownership has increased and startups have increased under President Biden and Vice President Harris compared to Trump. So again, Donald Trump is either lying or he's too stupid to recognize, or perhaps too deluded to recognize the facts as they are. So, the Boston Globe, it was not the Philadelphia Inquirer. There was another, an op-ed that I wanted to take a look at a different video. The Boston Globe wrote a really cool op-ed, a really well-written op-ed about Donald Trump's dangerous decline and how it's too dangerous to ignore. We can see the decline in the former president's ability to hold a train of thought, speak coherently, or demonstrate a command of the English language, to say nothing of policy. So why are Republicans in the press holding Trump to a different standard than Biden? This is by Kimberly Atkins Storr, and it was written just 5 days ago. Donald Trump's answer to a question about childcare costs last month was eye-opening, not because of what it said about his agenda if he were to return to the Oval Office, but what it said about his ability to do the job. Asked at an economic forum in New York about what specific legislation he would back to make childcare more affordable, Trump rambled incomprehensibly for nearly 2 minutes without answering the question. And it gives an example. We've looked at that video. It's gone viral. It is just a perfect 2.5 minute encapsulation of Donald Trump's inability to answer questions substantively and coherently. So I'm not going to bore you with the quote itself. The rest of his answer provided no clarification about a connection between import tariffs, if that is what Trump's referencing, and childcare costs. The lack of context or even complete sentences made his comments as clear as mud. But what was crystal clear was the decline in the former president's ability to hold a train of thought, speak coherently, or demonstrate a command of the English language, to say nothing of policy. President Biden, after struggling with his answers during a June debate with Trump, ended his bid for a second term in July. That decision came after Democrats publicly voiced concern about Biden's cognitive fitness, and the press pursued the controversy breathlessly for weeks. And I should say, Media Matters did a study, comprehensive study of, I think it was the top 5 publications in the country. So that includes the New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post. And by a factor of 10 to 1, there was much more coverage about Biden's cognitive fitness than Trump's, even though polls, even at the time, had said that a majority of Americans had doubts about both candidates' mental fitness. Yes, it was worse for Biden in the polls. There's no doubt about it. But even then, with Biden as the alternative, many Americans, 50 to 65%, depending on the polls, had doubts about Trump's mental fitness as well. But by a 10 to 1 ratio, there was more concern about Biden than Trump from the media, a staggering, unjustifiable asymmetry. Editorial boards, including the Globe's, had even urged Biden to step aside. Yet neither the media nor Republicans have shown that kind of urgency, as Trump has repeatedly shown himself to be, to put it kindly, unwell. That's not only unfair and irresponsible, it's dangerous for the future of our country. The next president will enter the Oval Office at a time of immense challenges, an economy on the upswing but still hamstrung by persistent inflation, the ongoing domestic threat of homegrown radicalized terrorism, a surge in racist, anti-Semitic, and Islamophobic hate crimes and bias incidents across the nation, expanding conflict in the Middle East and Ukraine, and the ongoing global threat of political and election interference by China, Iran, and Russia, just to highlight a few. The next president must be sharp and nimble in confronting these perils. Trump's decision to halt an Oaks, Pennsylvania town hall last week after 2 attendees needed medical attention and then convert the event to an impromptu dance party, dancing awkwardly to the tunes of The Village People and Barbra Streisand for over half an hour instead of answering voters' questions, does not paint a picture of a man up for the task of being commander-in-chief. And I do want to say on that, people cope and say, well, people passed out in the crowd. What was he supposed to do? Well, if you were really concerned about the health of the crowd, you would just cancel the event. You would say, hey, listen, people have passed out. This is obviously not tenable. We're going to cancel in a rain check. Instead, Trump kept the event going. So people were still in attendance and potentially at medical risk. He just didn't do anything with the time he was taking from them. He subjected them to a dance party. So anyone saying he didn't answer questions because people passed out, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Him answering questions versus dancing on stage for 40 minutes, that is not going to meaningfully increase or decrease the likelihood that other people would pass out. Doesn't make any sense. Trump and his campaign seem to be aware of his adult appearance. He canceled several interviews in recent days. At a rally last month in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, Trump tried to pass off his meandering verbal style as an intentional strategy called the weave. I'm not a doctor, but a report for STAT, several cognitive experts who studied Trump's speaking patterns over the course of several years, say his disjointed way of jumping from one subject to another, called tangentiality, and his increasing reliance on superlatives and absolute terms are consistent with several causes of cognitive decline. Though cautioning that they could not diagnose Trump without examining him, experts said his speech patterns match those of people experiencing the effects of things like mood changes, aging, and dementia. Quote, there's reasonable evidence suggestive of forms of dementia, clinical psychologist Ben Mike Ellis told STAT. Quote, the reduction in complexity of sentences and vocabulary does lead you to a certain picture of cognitive diminishment. Yet Trump's party has not urged him to step aside for the good of the country as Biden's did. And much of the press is doing the American people a disservice by treating Trump's obvious cognitive slippage as just Trump being Trump. Yes, the press has a lot to wrestle with when it comes to Trump, including his embrace of authoritarian strongmen, his refusal to vow to accept the results of elections, his criminal conviction and civil judgments for fraud and sexual abuse, and his racism and disparagement of women, LGBTQ people, and immigrants. But his diminishing cognitive ability can't be ignored. He may not be able to get a grip, but it's long past time the news media and Republicans stop participating in the gaslighting. We can see reality with our own eyes. And these are really well-written op-ed. And again, it just underscores much of what we've been seeing from Trump in interviews, informal interviews, on the campaign stump, at campaign events, at campaign rallies, in town hall events. This is a stupid man. He is. He's a genuinely stupid, incurious man. You have former Trump administration officials say that he would not read the presidential daily briefings. He had a short attention span. He didn't grasp, geopolitical mechanics. He didn't understand domestic or foreign policy. So he had a very low baseline to begin with. He was a profoundly stupid man. But he's not as sharp as he was in 2020. And Trump in 2020 wasn't as sharp as he was in 2016. So this is a really dangerous situation. Part of the reason it's so dangerous is not just because he's a presidential candidate, which would be bad enough. It's not just because he's the leader of one of two major political parties. That would be bad enough. It's because he basically has a 50-50 chance of becoming president again. So there's no telling what he'll be like in the next 4 years. So anyway, that's Donald Trump demonstrating his staggering cognitive decline once again, just a few weeks before the election. Will the American people really pay attention? I mean, clearly it's reflected in the polls. It's reflected in media coverage, but will they care enough to let that factor into their vote? Only time will tell, but I hope they do. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.